Good evening. Welcome, everyone at home watching us on television. You are watching the Public Works Advisory Board meeting on April 16th, and I will call the meeting to order at this point, and we certainly have a quorum. All of our members are here. So with that, we'll have a moment of silence. Does anybody have any announcements? No. The only thing I would mention, I was reading the director's report, and just a reminder to everyone out there, it's spring cleanup week. So if you have some extra trash that you want to get rid of, this is the week to do it, and the city will, at no additional cost, pick it up if you have 2 cubic feet or less. Okay, any announcements? We had announcements. Presentations? You're going to wait. Okay. And I see we don't have any members of the public, so I guess we will open and close public comment. Our next item is approval of the minutes of February 19th. Any comments from anybody?
I move to approve the minutes as stated.
I'll second that.
All right, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Director's report. Rob, would you like us to just comment on it, or do you want to give us an overview?
I was at least going to give you an overview on the water issues, and then maybe if you have questions on anything else, we can talk about those items. And I did print out, so you didn't have to squint at the screen, at least for the presentation. I did print out copies of the presentation for you to take a look at it. I think there should be enough there. 7. And then while we're passing out copies, this will be one for a little bit. A few minutes after that one, when we get to our items. And I should be talking on the microphone. I'm about to yell that.
Well, we're all anxious to hear this, because you cannot pick up a newspaper anymore without reading about water in the state of California. So
no, you
welcome
can't.
This.
You can't. So I'm going to go through this brief presentation that I have on water supply updates, water conservation, and answer any questions. So that was weird. I didn't know I put an effect in there. Some of you have seen this part of this presentation before, but I thought I'd get it out there just for a little bit more background again. City of Morro Bay has several sources that we can use for state water. Our majority of our water comes through the State Water Project. We have our desal plant, which we can run well water through, the brackish or nitrate-contaminated groundwater, and salt water through that plant. We also have untreated or raw groundwater that, if it meets the nitrate limits, we would pump after disinfection right into the water supply. Conservation is another source of water. I remember during the energy crisis, the utilities were saying the cheapest source of new power is saved power, and I think that holds true with water. And we have a future water source just up the road a bit when we relocate our new water reclamation facility. Reclaimed water will be a future source of to diversify our water portfolio and make us less reliant on state water. State water allocation is the annual allocation is 13 acre feet a year. That's how much we're allowed to, the maximum we're allowed to take. We typically request less than that. This year, I requested 1,140 acre feet a year based on past use and what I expect our conservation to be. We also have a 2,290 acre foot per year drought buffer or insurance policy. So you add that to our annual allocation, and you multiply that times the percent water available to get the amount of water that Morro Bay can get through the State Water Project. I didn't update the next number. It's about 1,000 acre feet less than that. We have about 2,000 acre feet of stored water in San Luis Reservoir, and we'll be drawing some of that out over this next year to make up the difference.
Are they allowing water to come through then? I thought that they had shut down the line.
They, over the winter time,
Oh.
they pumped a lot of water south of the Delta.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
San Luis Reservoir, I think, is at 60-something percent full. So they maximize their pumping over the wintertime to get a lot of water into Southern California as much as possible.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
State water is an interruptible water supply, and the allocations do fluctuate over the years. This year, the state is allocating a 20% allocation, which to Morro Bay is 721 acre feet, and we'll be pulling from that stored water to make up the difference to our 1,140 acre feet. Last year, it was a 5%, and we only got 180 acre feet, so we had to make up most of our water from stored water. That's where that 1,000 acre feet went to. And then over the years, it's fluctuated. Anything above about 36%, we're at our maximum allocation, and we can't take over our maximum amount. So that's why even at 65% and 80%, the maximum amount that we're allowed is 1313. Historically, Morro Bay has used groundwater as its water supply. Two groundwater basins, Choro Creek, where we have we're an appropriator of water from these two basins. We're not riparian users. We don't overlie the basins, so we have a permit that allows us to extract water from those basins from the state of California. Choro Basin, 1142 acre feet, 5 active wells. Choro Creek has some problems. The stream flow is required to be above 1.4 CFS, so it's flowing fairly well. I think right now it's flowing at about 0.6 CFS or less right now. So we haven't used Choro Creek water in years, a couple of years at least. Just haven't seen the stream flows above 1.4 CFS that would allow us to use it. Now, with an emergency permit, we can use those wells. We can petition the state for an emergency water right permit to use those wells. We are subject to water availability. An appropriator is kind of the first one kicked out. Riparian users have a higher right than appropriator does. Morro wells, 591 acre feet a year that's permitted, 4 active wells, right down by the outfield of Lila Kaiser Park, kind of behind the motel. There are wells there. They're also high in nitrates, and we use those wells as feed water for the brackish water reverse osmosis side at the desal plant. And we recover if 100 gallons a minute went into that plant, we recover about 80% of that water. So about 20% is rejected as it goes through the membranes, and we get about 80% of that water into our system. Seawater is another source of water. Permitted capacity, 645 acre feet a year as an emergency water supply. If all else fails, we can use salt water. Feeds from 5 saltwater wells along Embarcadero Road. There's iron and manganese fouling problems with those wells, so pre-filtration. We have a potassium permanganate or green sand filtration system ahead of our RO facility. We don't want that iron to get into the RO membranes. It would cause havoc. These wells really only ran for production during the mid-90s. And then it was shut down because state water came online. The unlimited water flowing from the Sacramento that saved all of Southern California. Well, it's not quite as wonderful as we once thought it was. The desal wells and outfall have a permit that expired a coastal development permit that expired in 1999. Coastal Commission in the mid-90s issued us a temporary permit and said, do these 4 things and you can make it permanent. Well, state water came online. The city didn't do those 4 things that were needed. The permit expired. Flash forward 10 plus years, 20 years. Nobody at Coastal remembered, nobody at the city remembered, so we're operating our plant merrily until we come across the expired permit, and now we're in the process of working with our Coastal Commission partners to get that a permanent facility.
Can I ask real quick, Rob? You say you do have a permitted capacity of 645. Can you actually pull it now, or do you have to wait till you work it out with the Coastal Commission?
We will use the desal plant in an emergency if needed, so we just get an emergency.
So they'll allow you to.
They will allow us to use it.
Situation.
What we basically told them is this is our system kind of last resort. We will not go dry in Morro Bay if we will run the plant if need be.
Yeah.
And they understand the need of that.
Can I just one quick follow-up?
Sure.
What would we have to do to get that permit? Are there changes we have to make to the plant to get the permit?
No real changes to the plant. We have to document a few things, our water conservation program. We have to submit a bunch of lab results to show that the discharge is not harmful to the aquatic life. Right now we're working with a consultant to develop that good project description and get it in front of Coastal. We've been working on it for off and on for a couple of years, and we probably need to get more on than off given the situation. So that'll be a major work task coming this summer.
Rob, excuse me. Another question on that, expanding on that. If we have the permitted capacity of 645 acre feet, does that mean that's all that can produce a year, or is that all it's permitted for? Because if we're talking about at some point in the future getting off of state water completely and using this, will this plant have to be?
That's its permitted capacity. We can actually run it at much higher rates than that. We can produce about 800 gallons a minute, which is pretty close to our conserving demand of water. So if we did a little bit more with conservation, we could meet, sorry to mix the units here, but it's the number that popped into my head. I can do the math later on to tell you what 800 gallons a minute is in acre feet a year, but it's not permitted currently to run continuously. That's why and it was meant as a emergency backup supply to other sources of supply.
But if we come to the point where we are just using that, it could make more, or would it have to be expanded?
It can currently make more, but it's not permitted
I
to make
understand
more.
that, but it can make more.
It can make more.
Thank you.
Yes, the membranes, some of the pumping equipment is much more efficient these days than, as we've replaced components of it, we've used more modern facilities, so we can get a little bit more efficiency out of it than when it was first constructed.
Thank you.
Conservation is a source of new water. Every drop that you save is a drop that you have for the future. In the 70s, we used overall, this is if you took all the water the city uses for even residential, commercial, divided it by our population, this is what we use. So it's a gross per capita rate, 193 gallons per person per day. Current water use in 2013, and I think it's dropped in 14, about 10 gallons per minute overall to about 207 gallons per person per day of this last year. And we can do a lot more. And there's a web link to ways to save water. We have some more on our webpage. That if you go to the city's webpage, hit the water conservation link on the left-hand links, it'll bring you to more ways to conserve water. Reclaimed water is the future water source. The city's local coastal plan anticipated 770 acre-feet a year offset agricultural and landscape demands. With changing regulations, perhaps when the coastal plan was written in the 80s, landscape and ag irrigation really was the only viable use for reclaimed water. I'll tell you, about 4 hours ago, I had a glass of reclaimed water up in Cambria, straight out of their microfiltration desal plant before it was injected back into the ground for groundwater recharge. And they have, a 12-log virus removal, 12-log cryptosporidium removal, giardia removal, back teas. It is cleaner than most people's drinking water, and they're injecting into the ground. They have a 2-month travel time to their extraction wells, and then they pull it back up out of the ground. And that's what they're doing up in Cambria. Very fast-tracked emergency permit to do that. Now they'll work over the next year or so getting a permanent permit on that. They go through an EIR and a regular coastal development permit.
Did it taste good?
Tasted like water.
Okay. I know it was pure. I know it was been cleaned, but did it? Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
it tasted better than Morro Bay tap water. I shouldn't have said that. And people have been drinking reclaimed water for centuries, millennia. There's not a drop of new water on the planet, so it's been a long time. So there may be other ways that we can use this reclaimed water other than irrigation. We can recharge the groundwater and pull it back out, and ultimately the state will be developing regulations for direct potable reuse. So it'll go directly from a highly treated advanced water treatment plant right back into our plumbing system. All the state agencies are very much behind water recycling. Ken Harris, the executive director of this local regional board, really says that the most beneficial use for our outflow from our water reclamation facility will be for some sort of human consumption. Some issues with state water, reclaimed water is salt can be a hindrance to use of this resource. Not a recourse, use of this resource. And because, especially for irrigation, many of the crops in this area that we would irrigate it with are salt sensitive. And we are salt sensitive too. So there will need to be some sort of RO process in order to use that reclaimed water. And that comes at a cost. Now, flashing forward a little bit, last year, Governor Brown made an emergency declaration on January 20th to conserve 20%. State Water Board adopted expanded emergency conservation regulations to maintain.
Rob, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
I downloaded the Sustainable Growth Water Act for 2014, and text search it. There was no mention of Morro Bay or Cayucas or Cambria. All they mention is West Coast. And there's the only 2 entries I can find in there for the West Coast are Los Osos. And they say that it has been adjudicated. It seems to me like they don't know we're here. when it comes to water conservation. And they're applying a lot of parameters and so on to other areas, and we're not even mentioned in the text. So I don't know what we have to do to get us mentioned in it so we can get some help like some of the other communities get with doing this.
Yeah, there's very few basins that are adjudicated in the California. In our area, the Santa Maria River Basin is an adjudicated basin. That means all the water rights are divided up. Morrow Creek and Choro Creek, those two groundwater basins are flowing underground streams. They don't need to be adjudicated. They're permitted by right of the state board. So we have a state water or a groundwater allocation that we have applied for based on engineering study and showing what the safe yield of the basin is. I'm not familiar with the publication that you quoted, so I'd have to do some research into that. But I know we show up on other lists from the state. They do know we are here. A lot of the money that is available and that is going out through Prop 1 is for shovel-ready projects that you can build right now. That's an overused term, shovel-ready, but they're looking to spend money on things that can be built today. And unfortunately, especially with our water reclamation facility, we're not ready to build today. Now, there's some planning money, but it's really small pots of money and typically requires a 50% match. We'll be going for that money because any dollar we offset is better than coming out of rates. But the majority of dollars goes to projects that have already gone through the CEQA process and are ready to build. March 27th, Water Board adopted our current emergency water conservation regulations. Where we are a year later, here's a chart showing the different types of usage throughout the city. So overall city usage, we've seen an 8% reduction in water use. Residential has seen a 7%. Commercial, not quite so good, but if we were to plot TOT or sales tax along with this curve, you can see that we're getting more visitors into town. So we have a higher population than we did the year before. So we have more people using water. We don't really have a way to identify water per visitor very well. Maybe we could plot water per TOT dollar to show that water use has come down. City facilities, we've done a fairly good job of dropping our water usage at city parks, and you'll see even more of that in the upcoming year. In some of our areas, we'll start to go a little bit brown. We don't need to keep some of that non-active turf area green, and we're looking for other alternatives for active turf area. For example, at Lila Kaiser Park, we're seeing what the payback period is for replacing the turf with artificial turf. And so parks are a general fund item. They have to buy their water from the water fund. We spend about $18,000 a year irrigating Lila Kaiser Park, the turf area. But we gain a lot of income from Lila Kaiser Park, too, with the softball tournament. So we can't quite just let it go brown. We have to have another alternative there.
Can I ask something, Rob?
Sure.
Earlier you talked about the residential use around 117 GPCD.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that's based on the 10,000 magic number we have as a population for the city. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Even though it doesn't count all the people from Bakersfield who have second homes here.
Correct.
Yeah. So basically what the city, the GPCD is probably somewhere around 70 to 80, I'm going to venture to guess.
Actually, if we just look at we looked at our meter data, and that's what this chart is based on here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. It's around 80, it looks like.
Or I think this last month we're at about 65% 5 gallons per person per
Right.
per day.
And I guess where I'm going is, Governor Brown has put out that edict of the 20%, but the reality is I think Morro Bay had always been sensitive to water usage, so they're not going to be able to drop 20% as readily as another community that was using a higher amount GPCD. Do you feel the state will give allowances on that basis?
So the state put out draft regulations that we are commenting on, and they have a tiered reduction system. So the conserving cities, the most conservative, like Cambria, they're actually looking for a 10% more reduction from Cambria. I don't know how they're going to squeeze that out of Cambria. They're looking for a 25% reduction from Morro Bay, and the highest water user, which is, I think, Santa Fe Springs. I don't know how they do this, but they use 500 gallons per person per day there. But they're only looking for a 35% reduction. So there seems to be some inequities, and we've made comments regarding that. I suggested they establish a ceiling statewide of what the overall 25% reduction should be. If you're already below that, I don't think you should be allowed to backslide to that. Like, we shouldn't be able to jump from 65 back up to 150 or something. But if you're 300 or 500, you should be able to make good strides to try to get down below that statewide.
But there's nothing formally in place, so to speak.
Not for another month or so.
Okay. Because I see Santa Fe Springs, and you throw that number out there, but I venture to guess they may have similar situation where they're counting the number of people in the town dividing through by the amount of water usage, and they could have a lot more people there than you realize. Thanks. I think you answered my question.
These are the current statewide emergency conservation regulations, and they pretty much mirror what the city's conservation regulations that are already were in effect. You can't wash sidewalks or driveways. Runoff is prohibited. You need to use a shut-off nozzle when you wash your car. We clarified that in our regulations. I think in our first go-around, we said you had to use a bucket to wash your car, and everybody made a joke about that, like it would scratch my car if I used a bucket to wash my car with it. If your fountain doesn't recirculate the water, no water use in it. If it rains, you're not supposed to irrigate 2 days till 2 days after that. You know, the standard, if you ask for water, you can get it at a restaurant. If you don't ask, you're not supposed to serve water. Hotels and most motels need to provide guests with the option of not having their linens and towels laundered daily. And this bottom section here, what water suppliers must do, this is what we need to do to track and enforce this. So we need to notify our customers. We need to impose restrictions on outdoor irrigation and report our water use to the state monthly and report on compliance and enforcement. That's kind of a new one there. I tell you, to date, we have not issued a citation. We've issued a lot of warnings and worked with people to get their irrigation system fixed. I won't say that every irrigation out in town is perfect. You do see some wet gutters here and there. So we're working on that. Here are the new conservation items the state has added as of this year. These are the draft regulations. These are supposed to go to a board hearing May 5th or 6th for adoption, and they'll go into effect probably 60 days after that. We talked a little bit about the first one, about the statewide goal is to achieve a 25% reduction, and they have 4 tiers. We're in tier 2, looking for a 20% reduction, the way the rules currently written. Prohibiting irrigation with potable water, that is not being delivered through drip or spray for newly constructed homes. So new homes will have to provide a drip system, no more overhead spray irrigation. Businesses will need to also reduce their water use in accordance with the 4-tiered system. So here in Morro Bay, if the goal stays in effect, we're at Tier 2. We would expect all our businesses to reduce their water use by 20%. Irrigation is prohibited on ornamental turf in public medians. I don't know why they just selected public medians. I'm thinking, based on comments that I've seen back to the state board, that's going to change to really all non kind of utility type turf areas. And we have to develop a rate structure that encourages conservation. I believe our new rate structure, which we'll be talking a little bit later about, does that. Again, irrigation is prohibited in turf areas on public medians, and we need to, again, continue to report to the state water board on usage, conservation, enforcement, and that's going to be a permanent regulation. So we'll be reporting our water use to the state forever. These are the city's current conservation rules, and they really mirror the state's. We have an outdoor irrigation limit with an odd-even system, so we only do 2 days a week. We clarified the wash-down water on boats and docks. It's only allowed for health and safety purposes. We did prohibit it completely, but there's some issues where they might need to wash down during fish processing because the health department says they do. We didn't want to catch people, catch 22. We say you can't. They say you have to. So if it's health and safety. And then all hoses need to have spring-loaded shutoffs or similar devices. Again, the restaurant, we have a swimming pool refilling ban unless it's for health and safety or structural need, and you can't use potable water for compaction and dust control purposes on construction sites. And Damaris Hansen at our office is overseeing this water conservation program. Questions can be, there's her email address, dhansen@morro-bay.ca.us. There's information on our water conservation program on our website, morro-bay.ca.us. SaveOurH2O.org is another good spot to go to. There's the number for Public Works. And with that, I'll conclude the water portion of the director's report. This was a little long as opposed to my normal director's report. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on any other issues or water issues that
yeah, thank you very much,
might
Rob.
have.
I had questions, but you answered all of them in this presentation. So, anybody else have questions on the rest of his report?
I just wanted to talk about this article that I saw in the paper. It says Brown may drop key part of water project. And I remember when Alex was here and we were talking about going out and taking care of ourselves and not depending on the state and getting off of the state water. And we said, yeah, well, that's a project that's 10 years out and everything. And it says the governor is proposing to drop a 50-year guarantee to restore the environment in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta as part of the Twin Tunnel Plan. The change comes after biologists at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and other federal agencies told the state they won't issue permits for the environmental plan because the state cannot prove it will restore salmon, smelt, sturgeon, and other wildlife. So right out the gate, there's problems.
Right.
So we were very smart to just put that out of our heads and just go and do what we have to do. But what you've shown us here shows that we're well on that way.
Okay, Rob, I have a question. The golf course, it's out of the city limits, but where does it get its water? And is it part of the allocation here too?
The Morro Bay Golf Course is actually in the city limits.
Oh.
It doesn't get water from the city, though. It's on state property, and it's run by the county. So every agency has a little bit of touch in it. They get their water from wells in the Choro Creek aquifer, and basically they have a water right to a portion of the flow coming out of CMC that comes into Choro Creek. They can extract from those wells there, so they have that water right.
Are we going to be seeing a browning of the golf course when they have to cut back also? Don't
They will have to cut back also, and I don't know what their current plan is for golf course management.
Okay, thank you.
I have nothing.
Stuart?
It seems to me that if we're going to cut back and let some of the parks go brown, that we should notify the public about what's going on with some sort of a sign out there. We're doing our part. Morro Bay is doing its part to conserve water and so on. That's my first comment. The second comment is this reduction of our water use by a percentage is not good for us because we're already at 117 gallons per person, and they're asking them to cut 25 or 20% off of that. It would be the lowest, probably outside of Cambria in the state. And somehow that needs to be a dual kind of a thing. And we are doing our part, and we've been doing our part. And I think that would put a hardship on our city asking us to cut down to almost nothing.
Yeah, those are exactly our comments based on the draft rule going back to the state is the state needs to work a little bit harder on the water wasters rather than the water conservers. And it seems like the water wasters are almost getting a buy, and we're being asked to, we're being penalized.
I got a question, Rob. On the stored water, I think you said we used up about 1,000 acre feet last year,
Yeah.
and we're planning to pull from it again. Does that get replenished at some point? Is there a way to replenish that stored water?
That water the stored water is the difference between our 13 acre feet a year of allocation and what we actually take from the state water project. So if we take 1,000 acre feet, then 313 acre feet are left behind for us to extract at some later date. Now if San Luis Reservoir ever spills, everybody's stored water gets reset to zero. You get no more stored water. Then you start over again because the state's thinking is if San Luis Reservoir spills, there's no more drought and you don't need stored water anymore. You just start from zero. Now that is paper water too. That is a mathematical accounting it doesn't account for evaporation, and there's nothing in the formula that counts for evaporation, but we all know evaporation is real. So I would expect it if everybody said, I want my stored water right now, it'd be like a run on the banks in the Depression. It might not all be there.
Along that same guideline, Rob, if the reservoir depletes quicker than they've estimated, is there a set guideline as to when they would come back to us and all the other towns and say, your allocation now has become this much less, and so your stored water has disappeared as well? Are there set variables yet?
Well, the state does an allocation of state water every year. So last year, around the end of December, they announced that based on movement of water south of the delta, they allocated 20% for that year of the state. So it typically doesn't change after about this time of the year. They don't. So next year, if we get another dry year, I would expect a zero allocation year. Right. And 0 times 1313 is 0. Now we can use that. We can pull that stored water, but there'll be a point where they can't extract. There's a physical limitation of what they can get out of a reservoir. We've seen that at Stu's old stomping around Folsom, where they had to extend the intakes to get after the reservoir level dropped to get to that water. There was still some water in there, but they couldn't get it. I think a couple of the other reservoirs are having that same issue.
Right. So we're crossing our fingers for the rest of this year.
Yes.
That water's there for us.
That water's there.
Okay.
But I do understand between what you're allowed as an emergency from seawater as well as the Morrow Creek groundwater, you could meet the needs of this town.
Correct.
in any
We would
given
not
year.
go dry.
I want to make sure it's clear
We
that
may
water
have
isn't
to
running
impose
out.
stricter conservation regulations.
A hypothetical for you. We've talked in the past about how our city can move away from using state water and relying on our own resources. Is there a point in state water that if the supply drops enough that the state would give us a certain amount of forgiveness on our contract and we could step away from that commitment and
No.
start? No, they got the deal. They want the money till it runs out. Okay.
We owe it for the construction of the infrastructure that got the water here. So we promised to pay it, and they promised to build it, and they built it. Now we need to pay them back.
Any other questions for Rob? Okay.
Is the city doing anything about rain barrels or buckets or giving everybody free succulents in exchange for their roses or anything like that?
Damaris is working pretty hard on developing a water conservation incentive program. We'll probably adopt something like most of the other cities on the Central Coast have for turf reduction, like a 25 cents per square foot rebate for removing your turf and replanting, xeriscaping, low drought tolerant type planting. So up to a cap. Typically, the cities have capped that at about $500. Most cities have also said your turf has to be in good condition to get that rebate. So you can't have stopped irrigating already, let it die, and then get a rebate for that. We're also looking into rain barrels, a giveaway for rain barrels. Some of the other agencies have done shower timers. They have a simple one that's like a egg timer that you just keep in the shower with you. They have a much more sophisticated one that takes the plumber to put in that actually shuts off your water after 5 minutes. And we don't think we're going to go that route. We'll probably try simple first rather than difficult. We've also looked at recirculation pumps. Those were popular for a while, not so much anymore. Cambria gave those away for a long time. So if you have a, central hot water heater, it keeps the hot water going back to your faucet, but it kind of makes all your water tepid. Yeah.
No, you get hot water. Mine's just tepid. It's when you turn on the cold. When you turn on the cold water, it's tepid. It's like 80 degrees. But you can get it hot whenever you want. It just gets hotter faster so you don't waste so much water.
Right.
Maybe we'll give away shower buckets. I don't know.
Could you explain how the shower buckets work? I haven't had anybody explain that to me.
So, as you're waiting for your water to heat up in the morning, you put a bucket in there to catch that water.
Oh, okay. So it's strictly to catch the cold water.
And then
before
you
hit
use
hot.
that to
Gotcha.
either
I
dump
thought it was
into
like cars. You were taking a shower
No.
with the bucket. It hurts. Thank you.
I might also add that the city, in conjunction with Morro Bay and Bloom, is putting in a water reclamation tub. I don't know what you call it.
Rain barrel.
A large rain barrel down on the Embarcadero next to the chess set. So that'll be up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So that people can see it and watch it and
Yeah.
see how it works.
And we're looking to put one at our building downtown too, when people come in and ask what they can do, it's nice to take them around to the side of the building and show them how this actually ties into your rain gutters, and it's pretty simple to put in.
Well, can we have a motion to approve of the director's report?
I'll move to approve the director's report.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm going to put the other slide presentation on now.
All right. Yeah, I understand that next we're going to be given an update on the water and sewer rate situation, and so we're anxious to hear that. Everybody by now should have received the notice in their water bills, right? Everybody did? Okay.
If you didn't, excuse me. If you didn't, I have extra copies. Anybody out there in the audience that wants one of the notice? It's a 6-page notice, so it gives a lot of information about water and sewer rates. And as you know, you heard this item a couple of times. Alex Handlers came and gave a preliminary presentation and then an update to that based on some questions that you have. And then Barterwells took what they heard at this meeting and other public comment, and we presented that at a council study session on February 24th, followed up with a council hearing, and I didn't put the date of the council hearing. It occurred at the March 24th meeting where they approved sending out the notices and adopted the proposed rates to be included in those notices. So I'm going to go through this brief presentation. Dave Buckingham and I worked on this presentation together, so I can't take credit for all of it. Dave took I think I sent you all my white paper, which was a couple of pages. He distilled that even more to get the salient features out of it to get into a 5-slide PowerPoint presentation that I think captures the gist of what we're doing here. Everybody's received notice of the intended rate increase. The city's mailed notice to every property owner in the county database, along with every mail receptacle. So you may have gotten 2. There's a possibility that some folks got 2 notices, especially if you receive mail at your home and you have a P.O. box. You could have received 2 of those. The increase has been vetted publicly 4 times, twice at the Public Works Advisory Board and twice at the City Council meeting. And it's really essential that we do this to meet our state water contract obligations, to rebuild our wastewater treatment plant as a new water reclamation facility and move towards sustainability and independence for our water supply, and fund the needed operational and capital improvements and maintain adequate reserves in the funds. You've all seen this graph before. This is water rates. 20 years of no increase got us to here. If we would have just increased over time at about 3.5%, would have got us to the same point, probably less painfully, but we didn't do that. And as Alex has told us, in effect, due to inflation, in actuality, we've had a 36% reduction in our water rates because it's not paying as much as it did at one point in time. We're currently, this year, we're taking $900,000 out of our accumulation fund or reserves to pay for operational costs and a minor portion of our capital program. So that's not a good thing to do. While we have a couple $1 million in the bank, that wouldn't last very long if we operated in this deficit. Our sewer rates are needed. Our wastewater treatment plant, existing plant, is 62 years old, built in, I think, 1953. The math works on that. It's down near the beach off of Tuscadero Road. While I'm on Tuscadero Road, if you haven't seen it already, check out the green bike lanes that we have on Tuscadero Road. Very quite bright, and hopefully will make it much easier to cross there. A little off the subject, but I hearken back to the director's report. That treatment plant dumps between, depending on who's in town and who's not, and how many people are in Cayucas, 850 to 1 million gallons of water, treated water that we could be using in our city into the ocean every day. That's about 85% of our water need. And the water will be reclaimed and reused. And as we've said here, it's an essential step to getting off or reducing our reliance on state water. I'm not 100% sure that we should go to zero on state water, depending what the costs end up being, of course. But it would be nice to have a very diverse portfolio of water that we can.
Excuse me, Rob.
Yeah.
When we have a lot of stormwater, it goes into the plant too, doesn't it?
No, we don't really. The city doesn't really have a stormwater system, as you can see from our streets. It goes in gutter flow, goes into a very small storm drain system and dumps out either into the bay here at the south end of the town, or there's several outfalls and into the creeks in the north end of town. So no stormwater goes into except the stormwater that actually lands on that site. So not a whole
Or the
lot.
infiltration into
Yeah.
your sewer line.
Infiltration of the sewer lines, yes. Steve's got it. We do have some I&I that makes it into our sewer. So that water does run through our plant. Thanks, Steve.
So is there any plan in the future to capture some of that water that flows out into the ocean? Some of the
Not a
fresh rainwater?
centralized system. We would do that through individual rain barrel systems. Be very expensive to capture and treat that water on a citywide basis. Probably more cost effective to do it on individual home sites. This rate increase adopts the minimum amount that's needed to meet our needs, and it's roughly doubling both our sewer and water rate, not quite, but roughly doubling our water and sewer rates over the next couple of years, or 5 years. It also gives this Prop 218 process will give the council the ability, with a need and notice, to approve a couple of temporary surcharges. One is for a temporary surcharge for use of the desalination facility. There is I think $3 if it's going through salt water, and $1.60 per billing unit surcharge if it's going through the brackish water side. That would have to be adopted by council at the time, and only after the desal plant is needed to run for an extended period of time.
Can I ask a quick question? That's the one that's bothered me in all of this, reading through it. And it's not that I can agree with both those surcharges for their reasons stated. However, if you are using the desal plant, you wouldn't have a water shortage where you weren't collecting enough in fees to cover your costs. Can they happen at the same time? Can you be actually asking for both surcharges at the same time and space? Does that make sense?
I don't think we can.
No, that's what I didn't read anywhere where they couldn't.
I think that would
stick you
be
with both, but
that would be impossible.
It seems to me it's one or the other.
Yeah, that would be. If our desal plant can't run and we have limited other water supplies,
Right.
I think that's when the other low water.
Yeah, that's because you're not selling enough water.
Correct.
You need the money.
If
But
we're making
you're-
water from our desal
then
plant, we
you're
want to be selling it.
Yeah, okay. You answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the other surcharge is one we just talked about, the low water surcharge, where Unfortunately, it sounds like double punishment, and it kind of is. We're asking you to really cut back on water use, and we're going to charge you a lot more for the water use. So as you can see, it doesn't affect the lowest tier. So if you're really conserving, you don't get hit with this low water surcharge. But if we're in a stage 4, stage 5 critical or emergency water situation, and up in some of the higher tiers, you do get hit with a water surcharge.
So, Rob, would it be up to the council to decide whether to put that in effect with a stage 4 or a stage 5?
Yes, it takes action of council. And I just misspoke. I think I looked at this chart wrong. It charges a surcharge at every
Right,
tier.
it is.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. So it charges from the first unit, a smaller surcharge than as you get up with a, stage 5 high user. You're up paying almost $30 a unit at that point.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's
hopefully
why
nobody's at that point.
I wanted to make sure they weren't additive.
No,
Yeah.
I think that would be impossible to do.
Oh, okay.
Because we have plenty of water, and we wouldn't have declared that emergency if we're making water at our desal plant.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The last one on there is the council did not adopt the third Bartle Wells recommended surcharge for the big state water project. So this would need to come back for Prop 218 should the city want to stay on state water and if there's a big state water project. So this would need to come back to the council and ultimately through the Prop 218 process to get imposed.
Thank you again, Rob.
Okay.
Any further questions that we didn't interrupt you with? Starting with Stu, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Chris? No?
I'm good. Thank you.
Jan? Debbie? Fine. All right.
I just want to bring up one more thing about the Prop 218 process. So the council will be holding a public hearing on May 26th. That's by the end of that hearing, if you are going to protest the rates, you need to have delivered your protest in writing to the city clerk before the end of the hearing. So you can, if you do want to protest, you can mail it in today, and our clerk is receiving those, or drop it off at her office at City Hall, or you can bring it to the hearing and drop off there at that point in time. So there is ample opportunity for those folks that do want to protest that to make that protest.
All right. Thank you. Sure. Jan has a question.
I guess I'm not okay after all. I was just, this may be I don't know, screwed up in my head, but if we stay on state water and our obligation to the state gets paid for the pipes and the infrastructure that we have, how then do we pay, how do they charge us for the water that we use? Is that, or are we paying that already on top of the cost?
We are paying that already on top of the cost.
So will there be a decrease will the price go down?
In theory, there will be.
But not in your pocketbook probably, but in theory.
In theory, if the debt is paid down, and the state didn't have another project that they needed to do, then we would have no debt service. We would just be paying for the water, the treatment of that water, and the conveyance to Morro Bay, which is a very small amount of the wet water is really only about $50 an acre foot. It's the rest of the infrastructure that the state built, getting it from Northern California down here to Devil's Den, treating it Devil's Den, and then pumping it across over here to Morro Bay.
And then, of course, when it's all paid off, we have to always maintain the infrastructure, right?
Yes.
So that's going to be, so that price will in all probability, will not ever be lower.
And when in 7 years, when the debt is paid down, we do have an opportunity to renegotiate how much state water we want to take, too. So I think that time nicely coincides with the completion of the water reclamation facility. So,
Okay, do we need to make a motion, Rob?
this was just an informational item for your use. And just for your information, talking about informational items, sorry. In June, we'll be talking a lot more about water. We'll have what the mayor is coining the Water Summit meeting to talk much more about water and, where we may be going over the next year or years with water use.
Is this strictly on the potable water side?
Potable water side. We could, we'll probably do, as part of that, an update on the water reclamation facility, because we will have selected a facilities master plan consultant, maybe even interviewed them by that point in time, and be on our way through that process.
Well, let me ask if there's any other agenda items that
I'd
would
like
like
to
to
bring
add.
up for a future agenda item. I didn't see it as one of the line items on our agenda. We have 3 new members here that I don't think have ever. You guys haven't been through the facilities around town yet. That the Public Works. You have, David. Oh, okay. I was wondering, it's summertime. If you wanted to try for June or September, they usually do it with the trolley. And so I think our next meeting's June, and then the next one's September, when it'd still be running. Unless you guys have been all through the wastewater treatment plants and everything else.
No, I think it's good to do.
It's a very informative thing, and I would suggest we try to get that scheduled in. Like I say, either in June or September would probably work. And I know you both have been on it. Yeah. You didn't make it. Okay, so there's
We could also schedule I could do some sort of doodle poll and schedule a special meeting that meets everybody's schedule too, so that I know we're getting into vacation time of the year, but I think we can probably find a Thursday sometime if we don't want to interrupt regular agenda items, because it's difficult to hold the meeting on the trolley too. So,
and it might be good. I don't know who's ever been out to the Rancho Colina site, but that's where the new wastewater facility is going also.
Great.
So we'll schedule a tour. We'll either pick one of our regular meetings, or if that doesn't work out, we'll schedule a special meeting. During the summer, it's good because we'll have enough daylight to get through the tour, starting it late. We may try to start a few minutes early if that works.
I think you usually go around 3, don't you?
3 or 4. Try to get a little early start so that we can make sure that we hit everything before it gets dark.
Great. Thank you again. All right, Stu.
Rob, maybe perhaps for the future, I know we're water, wastewater. Streets is also in our charge. So is recycling, solid waste, trees, transportation, cable TV, and telecommunications related to the public. Could we get an overview of what those elements are and what effect we have on them? I know we heard a stop sign last time, and I went out and took a look at it, but it'd be nice to know what we have to do in conjunction with that to lessen the load on the city council.
And actually now the roads are in the purview of Public Works again.
Yes. Yes. So I think I brought that up before, that we've reorganized a little bit in the city. You don't call recreation for street repairs, you call Public Works. Or even better, you would go on our website and use the Let Us Know feature to let us know about potholes. Little preview, we'll probably be changing that Let Us Know to a more intuitive system, so that and that'll get work orders directly to the crews a little bit easier. We're exploring a AMS work order system called CityWorks in conjunction with our permitting program. So we're looking at that to implement over the next year or so.
As an aside, if I could ask, Rob, and it's only my ignorance of what's happened at city council meetings lately, the stop sign that you brought up that was here 2 months ago, did that go to city council yet?
It's going this next time.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're done. So the meeting is adjourned until our June 18th meeting, same time, same place.